recording. There we go. Now recording. And today is a really important lecture that has to do with the function of the kidneys. So last time we kind of looked at what are the anatomy of the kidneys and overall what are kidneys supposed to be doing. Today we're looking at how do they do these things. And we're going to start in a certain place with kidney anatomy in the nephron, which is at the glomerulus. So we're starting here with the glomerulus and the glomerular capsule. This is the beginning of kidney physiology. So we looked at last time what a glomerulus is it is a twist or a knot of capillaries where you have blood coming in, capillaries kind of twist around in these loops, the blood comes back out, and that twist is called the glomerulus. And then around that, we have the beginning of the tubule system that's kind of like a hat fitting around someone's head. And the beginning of this tubule system is called the glomerular capsule. It can also be called Bowman's capsule after the person who first realized what this was microscopically and then named it after himself. So those are the same concept, glomerular capsule or Bowman's capsule. And these structures together, so imagine, I wish I had a hood. Some of you have a hood. Ethan, can you put your hood up? Thank you. Okay, so Ethan just put his hood up over his head. And if his head is the glomerulus and his hood is the capsule, the combo of Ethan's head in a hat, we could call that the renal corpuscle. It's the combo. So if you have this picture, draw a circle around this whole thing, the combo, and that's called renal corpuscle. The word renal always refers to kidney stuff. And the word corpuscle means little body. So the first thing that people saw microscopically when they started looking at kidney was these little circular blob things, and they called it a renal corpuscle, the combo. And then as they investigated in more detail, they found, oh, there is a capillary knot inside, and there is this capsule that goes around it. The combo of those is renal corpuscle. And this is where filtration starts. So you can find these renal corpuscles mostly in an area of the kidney that's called cortex. Cortex is always kind of toward the outside of something. So if we look at the shape of a kidney, it's bean shaped, and the outermost layer that they've got colored in orangey here, this is cortex. And when you look next week in lab at the cortex tissue, it's going to look like this. So it's a lot of pink, and once in a while there will be these little blobs that are kind of circular, and they look like pomegranate seeds to me. Like, I don't eat pomegranates, but I've seen pictures of them. And when you break them open, they look kind of like this. So this whole thing, microscopically, that's the renal corpuscle. And it's got on the inside capillaries, which are the glomerulus, and then it's got a capsule going around it. And you have lots of these, really lots of these. And they're connected to a blood supply that you can see here. And you find those in the cortex of the kidney. And what you also have next to these is tubule system. So I want to go back here. So renal corpuscle is this combo. There are also in that area a lot of tubules that are carrying waste products. And the tubules tend to look like open hollow space microscopically, like this. So when you're seeing this gaps in kidney tissue and there's a little open space in there, those are tubules that have gotten sliced through when they made the microscope slide section. And this white space on the inside, that's the space inside the tubules. So the tubules kind of start in the cortex and they kind of extend through the middle of the kidney, this region that we call medulla. So what they've got here, the white, that's the middle of the kidney or the medulla. And the medulla has more tubules relatively. The cortex has relatively more glomerulus or renal corpuscle. And these are the parts of the kidney that are doing the work of filtering. So most of today, we're going to look at how does the filtering happen? How do we take blood and get certain things out of it and put it in the urine, but keep the helpful stuff in the blood? That's what kidneys are doing. So this slide, I have added this back in. It's the same slide that you've got previously, but you don't have one in this spot. You just have it a few slides back, and I wanted to put it again here. So we've got blood coming in. Blood spreads out to the cortex, where you've got renal corpuscles out here to do filtering. And then the stuff that gets filtered out is going to drain through tubule system back toward the middle of the kidney, back toward this way. And the stuff that gets filtered out, we're going to call that urine eventually. And the urine is going to move from cortex back toward the middle, and it goes through the system of structures. So I want to point to some of these structures because you're going to see them in lab next week. So out here, we've got cortex, and there are some sections of cortex that kind of go in between these fish fin looking things. So we've got renal cortex here. We've got some sections in between, that's called renal column. And those are going in between some areas that look like fish fin to me, called renal pyramid. Or maybe they look like a corn kernel or something. Renal pyramid. And the pyramids then drain into this branching tree-like structure toward the middle of the kidney that is going to be colored whitish yellow. And so if you imagine, we've kind of got urine products coming this way and draining from small sections into big sections, all coming together and eventually go out the ureter. And these drainage structures are called minor calyx. That's like a twig on a branch. And then you have those joined together into regions called major calyx. So here we see 3 minor calyx drained together into a region called major calyx, and that would be like a branch. And then the major calyces drain together into a region that's like a trunk, and that's called renal pelvis. So this area, kind of behind these vessels, that's called renal pelvis, and then drains on out the ureter. So all those white structures, those are draining urine. The urine starts to form when we have filtration out in the cortex. So that kind of reviews our anatomy a little bit. And this list of structures tells you, where does urine start and end? The path of urine right here. Most of the point of this list is to get you used to writing the words so that when you next week in lab look at the anatomy, you're kind of familiar with the words and you've kind of seen it once, because to me, kidney anatomy is complicated and weird, and it's generally stuff that people have never heard of before. People have heard of a colon and an appendix, maybe, you know, esophageal sphincter, stuff like that. Kidney stuff tends to be new. Oh, while we're here, something I forgot to tell you last time. Very important words that are almost the same, but not. Notice these words have a lot of the same letters. They are kind of in the same body location. They are vastly different things. So please take note when you are writing about an anatomical structure in this last 6 weeks of class, be sure that you are talking about the one that you mean to talk about. One time I was grading tests. I tend to grade tests while people are taking another test in another class. So I was grading tests for this class during some upper level bio test, and I could not stop laughing out loud because someone was trying to answer a question about UTIs. Like, why do men get fewer UTIs than women? And they said it's because male uterus is so long. It's like 20 centimeters long. And then the class is taking the other tests, like looking at me. So I had to tell them what's going on. It's just no. So these 3 words. Yeah. I still remember who it was too. I love them very much, but that totally made me laugh. 3 separate words, 3 different things. Okay. So we will now look, how does this happen? How do we make urine to help get wastes out of our blood and then out of the body? So nephrons are going to help us do this. They're doing the work. They're making the urine. And what's supposed to be in urine is wastes like urea and creatinine and stuff like that, and water and certain electrolytes. That's what's supposed to be leaving the body in urine. And your kidneys, your nephrons do this if we're healthy, and they do this in 3 particular steps. And this is what the steps are called. They're happening at different places along the nephron, and each one of these steps is kind of doing something different. On exam 4, which is next Friday, one of the questions is to write down these steps in order, and it is 7 points. And you want to get that right. You do have to have all the words. So focus on that first. What are the names of the steps? We've got glomerular filtration. That comes first. Second step is tubular reabsorption. That one's in the middle. And then the last step is tubular secretion. Those are the steps. That's the order. That's a question that you definitely can get right on Friday if you study this. So that's not the whole question, but that's 7 points worth of stuff on next Friday exam. Write these down in order and then answer questions about it. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a flashcard for every one of those. That can be helpful. So how do they work? This graphic is going to make more sense probably after we have talked about all this, but what it is showing is up here, we've got bloodstream. So this is kind of showing a nephron without all the twistiness, let's say. So we have blood coming in, blood goes through the glomerulus, blood comes out, again, blood is in the peritubular capillaries, and then eventually it goes back out of the kidney. So we have blood flow moving this way. And that is kind of going in parallel with the tubule system. So we've got here in the yellow whitish, this is tubule system, which eventually is going to have urine. But as these go parallel, we could say that there is a parallel flow between the blood in the blood system and the filtrate. So filtrate is a new word. Filtrate is the stuff that's in the tubule system before it's definitely urine. So we could say that filtrate is kind of like pre-urine. And as the blood and the filtrate are kind of flowing along parallel to each other, they are exchanging, darker marker, they are going to be exchanging materials back and forth. And these arrows showing different directions. See, here's an arrow that's moving from blood to filtrate. That's step one. That's glomerular filtration. Step two, we have arrows going from the filtrate back into the blood. That's step two, tubular reabsorption. And then step three, we've got stuff again going from the blood back into the filtrate, tubular secretion. And by the end of all of this, what's in the tubules will be urine. At this point, the urine is finished. And that urine is going to be the same urine that we release from the body through the urethra. But in the nephron, there's a lot of back and forth of things moving this way and that way. Okay, so here's an example. I had a hard time with kidney stuff when I first learned about it. And whenever I have a hard time myself, I become a better teacher. So I'm going to compare urine formation to cleaning out my purse. Time here is always like fun and exciting and slightly ridiculous. But I've got, yep, it's not everything. This purse holds a lot. Just got a lot of stuff in here. Okay. So the best way to clean out your purse is to dump out all the things. And then you look at what's there, and then you can decide, do I need this or not? And then, so firstly, there's some stuff that's in my purse that's so big. Oh, thank you. Did that roll away? That's still good. So some stuff in my purse that's too big and it didn't fall out. Yeah. I do still need all of that. I need all that. Okay, and then so for the stuff that's small and did fall out, yeah, I still need that. I've got some trash in here, mostly cough drop wrappers. This other stuff is still good. I need it. Yeah, I guess. Yes, I need all these lipsticks very much. I do. So I'm gonna put all this stuff back in because I need this. It's helpful. I'm gonna need it later. It's part of my life. There we go. Definitely need this. This is trash. So this I could get rid of now. Throw it away. And you might think, well, isn't it easier to just kind of like dig around in your purse and find the trash? And then, not dump everything out? Well, that is a way to do it, but your kidneys do this way. So your kidneys operate by doing this set of steps. This set of steps. So the first step is to dump out small stuff, relatively small stuff. Put the useful things back. Get rid of the waste that didn't get put back. That's how they operate. So those basic steps. And those steps pretty much line up with the names of the 3 steps that go with urine formation. There is one step that I didn't really do with my purse because I actually did clean out my purse kind of recently. It's embarrassing. I cleaned it out right at the end of spring break. It's already got like that. There is a step that I didn't really show with the purse that's a last chance to throw out. Like if I came back over here and I decide, yeah, this coupon is actually expired. It is expired. It actually is expired. $10 off 100 at Food City. And we went to Food City with this in the purse, did not use it. Now it's expired. Sad. Okay, so I do have something like, oh, let me do a last chance. I do need to get that rid of it because it's expired. That's how your kidneys tend to operate. And this starts with step 1, which is glomerular filtration. Did I just go? Yeah, we need this picture. So this is the start. We have stuff coming in the blood, and it hits this set of glomerular capillaries, and these capillaries are leaky, like all capillaries, but they are extra leaky. They are extra leaky on purpose because they have slits or holes in them called fenestrae, which is not a term that you need to know for this class, but that's what they're called. And when the blood hits this capillary bed, there's going to be a lot of stuff leak out of these leaky capillaries. So the capillaries in the glomerulus are extra leaky, and we have blood coming in under pressure, like blood pressure. Like if you've ever used a soaker hose in a garden, you have a regular hose that connects to it, and then it hits the leaky region and you get stuff coming out. So this is the dumping out, the glomerular filtration. There are going to be things that come out of the blood through those capillary slits. And this happens at the beginning. So it's happening in the glomerulus. And we're going to have things come out of the blood through these slits, and it's going to go into the capsule, or you could write there that it's going to go into the filtrate. That might be better, actually. So we've got stuff moving from the blood into the tubule system in that liquid that we call now filtrate. And here's the things that can go out. So the things that get filtered out in this way are anything small enough to get squeezed out through those holes in the capillary. Anything small. Anything small. So this is going to be water. You write this in the list of like what does get filtered out. We've got water, glucose, sodium, potassium, calcium, small hormones, a lot of stuff, amino acids. vitamins, anything small. There's not like a choice. Like when I'm dumping my purse, anything small is going to fall out. Anything big, too big to fall out, is going to stay. So all of that stuff gets dumped out. Also including wastes. Wastes, the things that we don't need in the blood. So if you're watching this later on the recording, what I've got here is water, glucose, sodium, potassium, calcium, small hormones, amino acids, vitamins, and wastes. And a lot of the stuff that just came out of the blood is good stuff that we still need to keep in the body. That's good stuff. We actually would like to keep that in the body. So that's what does get filtered out. The things that don't, the things that stay in the blood during this step are big things. Like if we've got large, very large proteins, blood cells, any type of blood cells ought to not be coming out those capillary slits. They're too big. So those would stay in. They're too big. So this stuff that comes out, we now call this filtrate. And the filtrate is kind of like blood plasma and the things dissolved in it. But that has now gotten pushed into the tubule system. So all of those things would be represented by these little green arrows here. So they're coming out of the blood and they're going into the glomerular capsule, and they are now filtrate. That's step one. Glomerular filtration. That's the start. What's going to happen next? We'll get to that. The reason that glomerular filtration happens is for two reasons. Number one, you've got capillary slits. Number two, the blood is coming in here under pressure, like your blood pressure, your hydrostatic pressure generated by your heart. And there is a balance here of like there's this level pushing outward. We've got osmotic pressure, pulling fluid back in, but the net movement should be outward. And this is basically driven by blood pressure. So what drives it? It's driven by blood pressure / hydrostatic pressure is what makes it happen. You won't have like pressure balancing math on this test, but I do want you to know what pushes the fluid out. It's blood pressure pushes the fluid out in the first step. So this is a very important step. We need these things to be filtering out of the blood all the time. And the measurement of how well it works is called glomerular filtration rate, or GFR. How well are your kidneys filtering stuff? You have a value called GFR. We tend to use, like one way we can measure GFR is to measure how much creatinine is in your blood versus how much creatinine got pushed out into the urine. And that can give us an idea of how well are your kidneys filtering today. So things that increase GFR would be blood pressure. So if your blood pressure goes up, you tend to filter more. And related to that, somewhat your hydration level. if you're very hydrated and drinking a lot of water, you'll have a greater GFR. And in general, good kidney health are things that increase GFR. Things that decrease GFR would be low blood pressure, dehydration, poor kidney health. You might think, well, what does that mean? Poor kidney health, in this sense, has to do with scarring or clogging in those kidney capillaries, in the glomerulus. So if you have capillary damage in your kidneys, or if you have something going on in your bloodstream, like an infection, and there's bacteria and there's antibodies binding each other, they can make their way to the kidneys and clog up the filter. And that's really, really bad. That's really bad, because if your filters are clogged, how are you going to get all the wastes out of your blood? So that would be an unhealthy kidney situation. And there's other things as well, but these are the basic things that make your kidneys work well versus make your kidneys work less well. Okay, so then we move to step 2. Tubular reabsorption. Tubular reabsorption is really important because a lot of the stuff that just came out of the blood and went into the filtrate was good things that we would like to keep. Like we would like to keep water in the body, and we would like to keep sugar in the body, and most of the sodium and hormones and amino acids and things like that. We need that stuff back. We don't want to just throw it all away. We need it back. So that's going to happen during this step, which is tubular reabsorption. And in tubular reabsorption, things are moving in the opposite direction. So they're moving from the filtrate. And I think this semester, I would like for you to use the word filtrate instead of tubules. We got things moving from the filtrate back into the blood. So this direction. And this step is called tubular reabsorption. So to me, that name is a little bit weird. So in this step, the tubule cells in the tubule walls are doing the reabsorbing or the grabbing back those useful substances from the filtrate. So there's a lot of good stuff floating in this filtrate in this step, and the cells of the tubule wall are getting it, moving it out of the filtrate and back into the blood. And this is called tubular reabsorption. It's a grabbing back. And this would include things like sodium, glucose, water, amino acids, etc. Things that we want to keep in the body. And your nephron tubules have the ability to move these things and keep them in the body. And this happens in a lot of different places in the tubule system. So this stands for proximal convoluted tubule. And it happens in the nephron loop. that diving down of the tubule. It happens in the distal convoluted tubule and a little bit in the collecting duct. So this basically happens everywhere except the glomerular capsule, this gathering back. If your kidneys are unhealthy in this aspect, you would have to constantly drink water, constantly eat more than you normally would, because you are not able to gather back this good stuff and you would just be peeing it out. And there are people that kind of happens to. It's really bad news. Your kidneys need to gather back this good stuff during the tubular reabsorption step. So this is like, I see all the stuff. I'm like, yeah, I still need that. Gotta put it back, keep it, because I'm going to need that later. So in this picture, well, I'll let you write this stuff first. Was it? This picture, I like it. It's one of the best pictures in the OpenStax book compared to other books. And it's got boxes in purple and it's got boxes in tan. The purple boxes are showing things that move during tubular reabsorption. And you can see that there are arrows coming out of the tubule, out of the filtrate, heading back toward the blood. And it's showing these are the things that you get reabsorbed in the proximal convoluted tubule. These are the things that get reabsorbed in the nephron loop. These are the things that get reabsorbed in the distal convoluted tubule. And these are the things that can be reabsorbed in the collecting duct. For this class, you don't need that level of detail. You just need to know this is the second step. It happens kind of all along the length of the nephron tubules. And we are reabsorbing generally things that are good that we need. This list is the list I want you to know. These in the purple box are the actual list. If you're going into nursing school, you might need to come back and look at this at some point, which you will because you will have kept these notes. So we're reabsorbing the good things, keeping them in the blood. The way that our kidneys do this, like how do we get it back? How do the tubule cells get this stuff back? They are spending ATP to do it. It's not like they magically go back to the blood. There has to be spending of ATP to do this. And so it's active transport. So you could write that on this page. Do it active. You already have that. ATP is what we need to right here. So make a note. Your kidneys have to spend ATP to get this stuff back. It's worth it to keep your blood clean. So the major thing that your kidneys are spending ATP on is to move sodium. Sodium was in that list of things that we need to reabsorb back. Our kidneys, most of the ATP expenditure is to move sodium, that version of sodium ion, back to the blood. And if our kidneys move sodium back into the blood, water will follow by osmosis. So we don't have to spend more ATP to move water. We just move sodium. Water is going to follow it by osmosis. And a lot of the other good items will end up co-transporting with sodium. And the details of that, I'm not going to get into in this class. But if you had Bio 1 and you learned about symporters, coupled transport, if sodium is moving, a lot of those other good things will move with it as long as sodium is moving. So mostly our kidneys spend ATP to move sodium. These other things will end up moving also. And we end up filtering, like if we measure how much liquid blood, how much of the water in blood moves through the kidneys every day, it's 180 liters. And we reabsorb 99% of it. There's 1% of it left, and then basically this becomes your urine volume. So you could ask yourself, am I peeing a 2 liter per day? I don't know if you think about that. That's kind of like the average for a person of average height, average body volume, average hydration. We let 2 liters a day of water go. The rest of it that came through there, we reabsorb it all. Same for sodium. 630 grams of sodium go into your filtrate every day out of the blood. We get 99.5% of it back, and we let about 3 grams go in the urine per day. Because most of it is getting reabsorbed during tubular reabsorption. That's a good thing. This picture is just showing this is the lumen, this is where the filtrate is. So if you've got this picture, write the word filtrate here. And this is the cell in the wall of the tubule. And it's basically showing which way are things moving. So we've got sodium tending to move this way and move on into the blood. Many of these other good things will follow it as well. The details in here are like literally how does that happen? If you go into PA school, you might be talking about these particular mechanisms of how do amino acids co-transport. That stuff is here on this slide, but we're not getting into the detail for this class. But you've got to move sodium to make this other stuff move, essentially, and reabsorb the good things. So then we come to step 3, the last step. Tubular secretion. Tubular secretion. This is the final balancing step, or we could say this is the last chance to get the blood with the right makeup versus the urine with the right makeup. So most of the work has already been done. We've filtered stuff out. We've reclaimed the good things. There's probably a lot of waste still in the filtrate, which is fine. But during tubular secretion, this is a process of putting back stuff in the filtrate for a final balancing. So these tan boxes are showing what tends to get moved back into the filtrate? And it tends to be wastes. So like urea, uric acid, creatinine, drugs. Notice here we've got H+ and ammonia. This tends to be a pH balancing step too. This is a way you can pH balance your blood versus your urine. There's some potassium once in a while, but mostly it's pH and wastes. Under here, you could write the word pH. Like pH is not a substance, but this is balancing pH. And this tends to happen proximal and distal convoluted tubules for the most part. Let's put back some stuff into the filtrate that we actually do want to get rid of in the end. That's tubular secretion. This also spends ATP to do this. You're spending ATP to move these substances back to the filtrate. So for these last two steps, what's driving them is ATP, or what's driving them is active transport. Glomerular filtration, it's not active transport, it's blood pressure pushing fluid out. The other two steps, we spend energy to get the urine and the blood the way that we need it to be that day. Okay, so before we go on from these three steps, you have to know, you don't have to, I'm advising you to know what are the names of the steps in the order on the test. And then the questions that come after that have to do with what powers it, what moves, what direction, things like that. So let's go back to this overall cartoon right here. We didn't write that much on this page, but now that we've gone through the steps, you can use this page to kind of make notes about each step, like glomerular filtration. This is powered by blood pressure. It's moving blood to filtrate. We've got the direction on there. It's happening in the glomerulus. We've got that on there on the picture. And kind of what you need to then add in here is what is moving. What are the things that are moving? And you could do the same for these two steps. So for example, tubular secretion, it's happening out later in the tubule system. It's happening by active transport, or you could call it spending ATP. We've got stuff moving blood to filtrate. And the things that it tends to be are wastes and acid and base. Wastes and pH adjustment. So those things you do need to know all those things. You could have a flashcard for each step. You could use this picture to kind of write in all the different things and see it visually, whatever works for you. But that section of the test is probably 20 points overall, the whole thing. This urine formation stuff. Okay, so by making urine, we are regulating what leaves the body versus what stays in the blood. And as we get into kind of this wrinkle, we can kind of imagine that all things in the blood will either stay in the blood and continue circulating through the body, or at some point leave the blood. And kidneys are one place where things can leave the blood. So if something is leaving the blood through the kidneys, it's going into the urine. And we will release it from the body that way. The other general place where things can leave the blood is through the lungs. And this is much more limited. So what tends to leave the body to go out from the blood and into the lungs and then go on out? Something that we need to get rid of. Blowing it on you right now. Carbon dioxide. Yeah. So our lungs can release carbon dioxide, and that's a way to get things out of the blood. The kidneys can do much more to get wastes out of the blood. And your kidneys essentially are making decisions about, okay, there's this thing in the blood. Should it stay in or should it go into the urine? It's like either or, stay in or leave. And by doing that, we will make urine. And depending on what our body needs on a certain day, we might be making a lot of urine or we might be making not a lot of urine. Our kidneys are going to make filtrate, and they are going to reabsorb water back out of the filtrate, but not all of it. Any urine that we make, it's going to have some water in it. And you have observed this. So if you're well hydrated, you know that you are going to pee a lot more. You go, there it is. It's light color. There's a lot of it. But if you are dehydrated, your kidneys will try to help you and conserve water, and you will not make as much urine. And the urine that you do make is darker and it's less volume. And it just looks different, might smell different. Your kidneys are making a decision all the time. How much water should I let go? And what should be in it? And it's some pretty sophisticated decision making in a sense. Write this down first, then explain what that is. I'm gonna write an alternative explanation of this phrase over here. That's too complicated. Most of the time, water cannot cross from the filtrate through the wall of the collecting duct, or the wall of the DCT and the collecting duct. Most of the time, those are impermeable to water, and water will not be able to move across that wall. So let's show, where am I talking about here? Okay, most of the time, by the time filtrate gets to right here, it's hard for water to move across the wall of the tubule, most of the time, unless something special happens. Wait, what? Okay, unless this happens. So after you write this, you can put a big old unless. This happens. And this is a whole new concept, and we come back and talk about this again, Friday. And actually, we come back and talk about it again next Wednesday during the group learning thing. And this relates to a hormone called anti-diuretic hormone. We will start on this same concept on Friday and go on into the next slide set, which kind of directly relates to this. But what this is about is, how do your kidneys decide how much urine, how much water should I keep right now versus how much water should I let go in the urine? It's like it's accurate. I knew it was gonna be. Yeah, you said this.